The right to kill a child should never be up to popular vote. Welcome to Freedom Alive. Now that the High Court overturned the Roe and Casey decisions in 2022, the battle over abortion was returned to the people. Now, citizens and state legislators in many states are working to enshrine the murder of unborn children as a state constitutional right. John Stemberger, president of Liberty Counsel Action, has been involved in the fight to protect unborn babies for many years. And John joins us on this episode to discuss what's at stake, as many states could have abortion amendments on the 2024 ballot. Matt, you and John have been engaged in this pro-life fight for decades.
Yeah, for at least 35 years, going back to 1989 at least. And we were brought together because of a case that was going to the Florida Supreme Court, in which the Florida Supreme Court went the wrong way. They ended up saying that there was some kind of constitutional right in the Florida Constitution. We worked together to file a brief at the Florida Supreme Court. Back then, of course, they didn't accept our arguments. They should have, but they didn't, because there was no right in the Florida Constitution. So we worked collectively for 35 years. He founded Florida Family Policy Council. We through Liberty Counsel, and then later Liberty Counsel Action. What a better time for John to come and talk to us about the Florida abortion amendment, the other abortion amendments that are happening, how you can get involved, and what a great time for him to join the Liberty Counsel team.
Absolutely. It is the issue of our day, and all of us must get involved. We cannot wait to bring it to you, but our Freedom Alert is next.
The church must rise up and stop abortion amendments on the 2024 state ballots. After the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the Roe and Casey abortion decisions, the battle over abortion was returned to the people. Now voters in California, Michigan, Vermont, and Ohio have amended their state constitutions, making abortion a so-called fundamental right in their states. Currently, 12 states have ballot initiatives that are attempting to codify abortion access, strengthen abortion protections, or enshrine abortion as a state constitutional right. Maryland and New York have completed the process and will have the abortion issue on the November 2024 ballot. Colorado and Nebraska have two separate and opposing efforts on abortion. The right to kill a child should never be up to popular vote. All life is sacred and should never be determined in an election booth. More information, visit lc.org/abortion amendments.
Up next, Matt's interview with John Stemberger.
I'm very happy to be joined by the new president of Liberty Counsel Action, John Stemberger. John, you and I go back for 35 years. It's amazing. Back to 1989. And now you are the new president of Liberty Counsel Action, a sister ministry of Liberty Counsel. We want to talk about the abortion amendments, but I want to give a little bit of history about our background, because we actually began in the context of defending human life at the Florida Supreme Court going back to 1989.
That's right. It is amazing. I mean, I remember back in the day, Ken Connor, I was a first-year law student, and he said, I'm going to Canada for 3 weeks. I want you to write an amicus brief on behalf of legislators to the Florida Supreme Court. And I was just like, oh, my goodness. So I remember calling you, and you were very instrumental, and we put that brief together.
And I was only 2 years out of law school at that time. I graduated in 87. This was 89.
Right.
So I was a new attorney as well, general counsel of Florida Right to Life. And this brief went to the Florida Supreme Court regarding this issue of abortion, and the Florida Supreme Court went the wrong way, a very liberal activist court, and they interpreted into the Florida Constitution a radical right to an abortion that made it Florida more liberal on abortion than any other state in the nation. And it stayed that way until April 1, 2024. You wrote a law review article regarding the flawed Florida Supreme Court decision in 1989, filed an amicus brief. We filed an amicus brief for Liberty Counsel Action, Liberty Counsel, asking the court to overturn that 1989 abortion decision. And on April 1st, 2024, the Florida Supreme Court overturned the TW abortion decision, making Florida now from the most liberal abortion state in the nation to the most pro-life by virtue of overturning a bad decision, all the abortion decisions, upholding a 15-week law that allows a 6-week heartbeat law to go into effect.
Yeah. And it's amazing because it's 36 years of work and labor and arguments and advocacy. When I served on the Constitutional Revision Commission, which only meets once every 20 years, I made that was my sole argument, is the right to privacy has no right to abortion in it. And that was the history of it. It was all about informational privacy. So it's remarkable to see us now have this major victory on behalf of the most vulnerable people on the face of the earth.
It's incredible. And it's just a privilege to be able to have you on the same team here. Yeah. John founded and was the head of the Florida Family Policy Council, which was an incredibly active, powerful, effective policy council, one of the best in the entire nation, and now he's part of our Liberty Counsel team, president of Liberty Counsel Action, and also senior counsel of Liberty Counsel. So let's begin with the abortion amendments. There's about 12 states or so, 14 states with initiatives, but there's 12 states that have pro-abortion ballot initiatives on the ballot. We want to talk about those as we move forward because you may be in one of those states, or this issue may be coming to you. But let's talk about Florida, because on the same day that we had this wonderful decision, 6-1, overturning the abortion decisions, becoming the most pro-life state in the nation, on the same day, the Supreme Court of Florida, 4-3, allowed a Planned Parenthood-backed, radical, deceptive abortion amendment to go forward to the November ballot. Let's talk about what does that mean?
Yeah, so listeners need to understand there's going to be an amendment to vote on in November. It's called Amendment 4. We're asking you, to not support Amendment 4 because it's basically a radical abortion law. In Florida, there's 5 ways you can amend the Constitution. One of those ways is what's called a citizen initiative, and that is a bunch of people can sign petitions to put something on the ballot. Now, when you do that, you have to have a single subject requirement, and you have to have a non-misleading requirement, both reviewed by the Florida Supreme Court, and that's the decision you're referring to. The 3 women, which is amazing, all pro-life women, voted against and said this amendment is confusing, it's misleading, and it does not meet the single subject requirement. But the 4 men, unfortunately, many of whom are good justices, came to a different conclusion and are allowing it to be on the ballot. So we want to alert people to the nature of how radical and how far-reaching this amendment is, because it is quite radical.
Even the Chief Justice actually, although he was in the 4 majority, allowing this to go forward. And again, it's not that they agree with the substance of it. It's more of, does it meet certain criteria to get on the ballot? Actually acknowledge that there's a lot of confusion, a lot of vagueness in this particular amendment, but nevertheless still allowed it to go forward. This proposed amendment, just to show you how radical it is, will make Florida, this is a zero-sum game. Florida will either remain the most pro-life state in the nation, or it will become the most liberal abortion state in the nation. And there's no in between.
Permanently.
Permanently.
I like to analogize this to the Marvel Avengers thing. The movie is Endgame. Like, this is the end game. This is the final battle for pro-life issues in Florida. We're either going to be, after November, a permanent pro-life state that has you protecting a child after a detectable heartbeat, after 6 weeks of pregnancy, or we're going to be a radically pro-abortion state where every single law we've passed for 36 years will be struck down. So this is for all the marbles, if you will, in the battle of life. And so it couldn't be more serious. So we need to marshal as many forces as possible to help people understand this is a really bad thing. And it's something that ordinary citizens can engage in and make a difference in.
And you say it's the final battle. I mean, there's no do-overs here.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
There's no do-overs. This is it. This is the final game, if you will, the final event. Well, you say, well, maybe the Florida legislature can come in afterward and they pass a law like they've done in the past. Well, this amendment says no law shall prohibit, this is what it'll say on the ballot, or this is what the amendment actually will say. No law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's health care provider. So before viability, before the baby is able to live outside the womb, whenever that is, could be late second trimester, third trimester, who knows? It's up to some medical doctor to say what viability is. Or in this case, even not a medical doctor, a tattoo artist. We'll talk about that. But no law can prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion.
Yep.
That means that there's no law, except for parental notification. No law will stand up until at least late-term abortion. No law.
Yeah, because when you enshrine something like this as a fundamental right, the legal scrutiny is so high, it will strike down even parental consent, the waiting period, the 24-hour reflection period, which is very important to have a woman reflect on this decision. It'll strike down every law that's intended to protect women going through this procedure. The clinic regulations, the health and safety regulations. It's amazing that even women advocates should be saying, wait a second, this is going to not protect us. But the abortion clinics will be able to challenge these regulations, and they will not be able to stand the scrutiny of this fundamental right if this passes.
That's right. So that's why it's so critical. And there will be a vote yes or a vote no. If you vote yes, this goes into the Florida Constitution. If you vote no, it doesn't go into the Florida Constitution. It's simple as that. And there's going to be millions and millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars pumped into Florida to deceive people, to say this is an amendment to protect women, reproductive health, whatever they might say. But they won't say what it really means, that this is an amendment that will codify abortion in the Florida Constitution and allow it at any time for any reason up to and including birth. So after viability, whenever that is, it says there's still no law that can stand. Why? Because if a health care provider deems that it's necessary to protect the woman's health, well, the word health is not defined, and we know that that includes anything. It includes, a headache. It includes you just don't want to have a baby. It includes anything. But also the health care provider. That includes more than just what most people think of. It's not just medical doctors.
Yeah. So many listeners, we're kind of getting into the weeds of this, but they need to understand the complexity of it. On the same day Roe versus Wade is decided, another case called Doe versus Bolton was decided back in 1972. It's a hospital abortion case interpreting the word health. And the courts have used this very broad UN definition of health. So now you're talking about any symptom of pregnancy, nausea, headaches, vomiting. These are health issues. So for any health issue, you can get an abortion. So the duplicity of the whole thing is, it seems like it's saying the state can regulate abortion before viability, but then it says for any health reason, you can have an abortion. And the concept of health is so broad. I mean, any pregnant woman has some kind of a symptom, right, that affects their health. So it's basically abortion for any health reason at all, specifically health reasons that affect pregnancy.
And the healthcare provider, they could have limited it to a medical doctor like an MD or DO, an osteopathic physician, but they didn't. They used this broad, undefined term. Well, in Florida, that includes about 58 categories, which includes, and I'm not joking, it's not a hyperbole, it includes a 911 operator. It includes a physical therapist, a chiropractor. It includes an orthotic fitter, somebody who fits orthotics for your shoes, and the assistant to the orthotic fitter. And it includes even a tattoo artist. So a tattoo artist can say, oh, the baby's not viable, or even if it is viable, it's still necessary to protect the health. Bottom line is the only thing that will survive again is parental notification, which is nothing. Yeah. Every other law will be gone. It'll make Florida the most liberal abortion state in the nation. So this is the kind of thing that's happening, not just in Florida. So for those in Florida, whether you live in Florida, but if you vote in Florida, perhaps you're living in another state during this time, but you can vote in Florida. If you are a registered voter in Florida, it is critical. It is critical to vote for life in this situation. Vote for life, which means voting no on Amendment 4. Voting no is a vote for life. Voting for this is a vote for death, and not voting is a vote for death too. Yeah. You can't just sit on the sidelines.
That's right. Matt, I think that it's important. A lot of people, when they hear the word abortion, they think of politics, they think of Republicans, Democrats, they think of people protesting. They just have a really bad, but we need to get to the heart of what this is. One thing that God is deeply concerned with is those that are innocent and vulnerable. We look at James where it says pure and undefiled religion is what? To be with rescuing widows and orphans. Why? Because an orphan is a child who has no one to care for them. A widow in biblical times, if you didn't have a husband, you couldn't get remarried. You had no way to support yourself. You were literally abandoned because no one's going to remarry back then. And so God's heart is very engaged in those that cannot care for themselves. And the ultimate orphan in our society is the unborn child, where their own mother is despondent enough that they're going to want to destroy the life that's growing with them, the gift that God's given them. And so we have to see this as more than just a political issue. This is an issue that's deep within the heart of God. And this is exactly why the church needs to engage. Not because of this is politics. This is biblical. This is deep within the heart of God. This is James talking to us right here.
This is the right of all rights. There is no right that's greater than the right to life. Because without the right to life, the right to religious freedom, free exercise of religion, free speech, whatever right it is, it's meaningless to a lifeless corpse. Think about it. You could care less about freedom of religion if you're dead. If you don't have the right to life, then every other right is meaningless. The right to life is the preeminent right, and it comes from God, not government. Frankly, it's not up to vote. We've got to vote on it. We have to vote for life. And we have to do that whether it's in Florida, whether it's on this ballot initiative, or whether it's in some of the other states. So let's talk about what's in some of these other states. There are 12 states that have some kind of pro-abortion ballot measure attempting to go on to the ballot in November. And those include, and I'll just read them off, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Florida, as we've mentioned, Maryland, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New York, and South Dakota. Colorado and Nebraska have both pro-life and pro-abortion initiatives on the ballot there as well. John, let's talk about some of these. We can go through each one of these, but basically they have some similar things, and that is they want to enshrine in their constitutions, which would take it away from the people and take it away from the judges, a right to kill unborn children. Yeah. How can you address this when churches sometimes or pastors say, well, I don't get involved in politics?
Yeah, so this is not political. It's biblical. It's moral. It's the ultimate human rights issue. There's no issue that I can think of in society that is more fundamental to the heart of God, not clear in Scripture, that God cares for those who cannot care for themselves. And this is the situation we have with the unborn child. And the problem with these amendments is they're permanent. This is permanent, Matt. You can't just have another law to change things. These are permanent, and it's very, very hard to undo once you put something in the Constitution. So the other side is putting all their money and effort and energy into these abortion amendments. A matter of fact, in national politics, the other side is looking at trying to create abortion to be their number one issue. In the presidential election, it's going to be a big deal. And so we're seeing compromise everywhere, including in Republicans. And so we, as the church, need to stand up, have a clear prophetic voice and say, we're not here about politics. We're here about the Scripture. We're here about the heart of God. And we need to tell people to do what's right.
Now, I know there are some politicians that have said that they're pro-life, and then after Dobbs overturned Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 2022, they were sort of silent. And I know even now some are saying that they're, not so strong on these abortion amendments. Look, politicians, pastors, people, certainly Christians in the church, ought to run for life, not against it, because it is the right of all rights. You can't put slavery up to vote. You can't say, I know these are issues that are coming out in the states. My view, though, is that this is a transcendent right, and it supersedes government. It's a right that actually comes from God. The Declaration of Independence says we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which is the right to life. That comes from God, not government, and the duty of government is to protect it. How just a slap in the face of God, our Creator, is it to think that we have the power to go to a ballot box and vote to kill God's children?
Yeah. And if we can't get Christians to pull a lever to save the life of an unborn child, we're in sad shape. And so we're asking people to really, whatever your ministry is, I know, the Scripture uses the concept of the body. We're all different. We all have different ministries. But whatever your ministry is, this issue should be primary in everyone's heart and mind, because it's primary in God's heart and mind. And so it's different than every other issue, I think. And so whether you're supporting pregnancy centers, whatever you do, this issue needs to be front and center in all of our hearts and minds as one of the preeminent issues that we need to be thinking about in terms of culture and law and politics and even the Scripture. So I think that it's different in that way. And we need to engage the church and engage even common citizens to realize this is something that we can't just ignore. What's happening now, Matt, is that it's becoming unpopular in certain circles because of polling data and all this stuff. And we just need to say, no, we're going to be a voice. If we are the last man standing, we're going to stand for life. We're going to advocate for this because it's important to God. It's important to us. And it's like your fellow man. This is loving your neighbor, right? Loving your neighbor as yourself. Not just the unborn child, but we're also think about the young woman who's married, who's unmarried, and is pregnant and she's in distress now. This is an opportunity for the church to minister to these women. They're afraid. They're despondent. They don't know. They're scared more than ever been scared in their life. They've been abandoned by some guy. Their parents may or may not support them. So this is a beautiful opportunity for the church to engage. And so by supporting pregnancy centers, we can engage. By supporting the church, pro-life ministries, there's so many ways that we can do this, but we have got to defeat this on the ballot in November in Florida and throughout the country.
And throughout the country, yeah. And it's not just this November, because it may go on beyond that, too. If these ballot initiatives don't get on the ballot in one state in November, they're going to try to do this in another state. And they're going to continue to do this. This is the fight that is the preeminent fight now, post the Dobbs decision in 2022, because this battle has come now to the people. Really, it's a battle that transcends the people. But we're now into this political arena where some people say, well, it's a states' rights issue. You know, I understand the talking points on that. But life is really not a states' rights issue. Life is not one thing in Georgia and a different thing in Florida or Michigan. You know, when you have a politician or somebody, particular politician, that says, well, it's a states' rights issue, ask the politician, well, is slavery a states' rights issue? So could we have Nazis in one particular state voting to kill Jews or enslave people because of the color of their skin or their ethnicity, and in another state free? Can we have a free state and a slave state? Can we exist as a union with that? And I think the answer is clearly no. And if you can't have that kind of checkerboard on slavery, then, my goodness, how can you condone that when it's even something more fundamental, which is the right to life?
Yeah, and I have to correct reporters and politicians all the time because they say Dobbs returned the issue to the states, and it did not.
No.
The first paragraph said we return this issue to the people and their elected representatives. So that means both Congress and state legislatures. So this notion that it's just a states' rights issue and that's what Dobbs did that overturned Roe is completely wrong.
That's completely wrong. That's right. Well, you know, there's people that say, well, abortion is such a sensitive issue that, you know, it's up to the woman. And I know some people, for example, that may have been raped or they've had incest. It's such a sensitive issue, and the state should not get involved in it. So we ought to just have it, and people will be held accountable. What would you say to that?
Good Lord. I mean, the fundamental duty of government has to be to protect life. Yeah. I mean, if you think about just government, they need to be protecting citizens as a whole, whether it's police or military, from foreign threats. But this is the most vulnerable human beings on the face of the earth. Yeah. And the most safest place on the face of the earth, the mother's womb, has become the most dangerous place on the face of the earth. And so we need to help envision abortion-minded women who have become pregnant suddenly, that this is wrong, they can't do this, that there's ways, there's funding, we can support them. We need to let them know there's a different way. Adoption is always the better option. We can love them both. We can love the mother and the baby, right? So we have to think differently about this issue. We have to communicate about it differently. We have to be just as passionate for the mother in distress as we are for the unborn child, because God's heart is in both of those people. But there is two people there, right? Yeah, there are two there's people, an unborn child and then there's a woman.
That's right.
And so we need to be concerned about both of them.
That's exactly right. That's exactly why you want to talk about it, because you raise the standard of life, but you also extend the hand of the compassion and forgiveness of the Lord. And there's probably more people that may have had abortions that you might not realize. And it's an opportunity to minister and to heal.
And so here's what I would say to pastors who are watching. Here's what it looks like. Find the guy or the woman in your church that's running around always bugging you about issues, right? It's passionate about the life issue, and empower them. Say, under your authority or the authority of elders or deacons, say, make this your issue. Help the congregation, educate them, inform them, so you don't have to take the burden on yourself. Find responsible people, create a committee for social issues, and just engage. Every time there's an election, every 2 years, make sure people are understanding what's going on, that there's voter guides provided, and that you do something to motivate them to vote and engage the culture. Really, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about fundamentally changing your church or your theology or anything like that. We're just saying be responsible citizens. Steward your citizenship. God's given this to you as a gift, right? Where else in the world can we are the people, government by and of and for the people, right? And so when it talks about in the scripture, obeying the civil magistrate, well, the civil magistrate requires us to participate. Because that's why we have in this democracy, which operates in a constitutional republic, right? We have to engage. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And so really, the Bible is commanding us to participate. That's disobeying the government, because the form of government we have requires us to participate. So by not doing that, we're actually engaging in a form of illegitimate disobedience.
Well, our guest is John Stemberger. He is the president of Liberty Counsel Action. Liberty Counsel Action is lcaction.org. Go to that website, lcaction.org. We're going to have a lot of information there. We'll have voter guides for different issues around the country that we will review for a lot of different organizations. We do that all the time. But we also have resources regarding life, all these different amendments, and much, much more. lcaction.org. You can also visit Liberty Counsel's website as well, lc.org. And from both of those websites, you can send us an email, get involved, and now is the time to get involved, get your church involved, and stand for life and biblical issues. Thank you, John, for joining us on Freedom Alive.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt, for those at home, let's talk again about the stakes on this battle and really the all or nothing aspect of it, not just in Florida, but around the nation.
Well, Florida is certainly a clear example. You go either from the most pro-life state in the nation or the most pro-abortion state in the nation. But that is also the same in every state, essentially, no matter what the situation is, because either you enshrine this killing in the Constitution, or you defeat it and you fight for life. I mean, right now, the battle for life is the right of all right. It is the battle. It is the primary battle, because if you don't have the right to life, you don't have any rights. But beyond the issue of rights, as John said, you know, the 2 commandments, Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, love your God, love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might, all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And who is our neighbor? It's those around us. It's the most vulnerable. And the child in the womb is our neighbor. It is the preeminent neighbor who is the most helpless and vulnerable.
It is time for us to step up on this issue and behave in a biblical way, vote in a biblical way, think in a biblical way on this issue. There's never been more of a time in our country and in the world today where we have to act with courage, strength, and wisdom. And we are honored to be able to bring you the truth on issues like this. And we're going to stay against this issue, both in Florida and nationally, going forward. In closing, remember James 1, verse 27, which says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. Join us here next time. You'll hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again for Freedom Alive.